I am now angry at Terry Ford because the Baltimore Orioles lost today to the New York Metropolitans. Come on, man.
Orioles are in a little bit of a slide.
Who's playing the best baseball right now? You know, I'll be perfectly honest. I keep up enough with like looking at standings every once in a while, but I freely admit that I only care about the Atlanta Braves.
Royals are playing well.
Okay.
The Royals are playing a lot better.
Okay. All right.
Also, because they kicked the Reds can all over the place over the weekend.
Hmm.
And they weren't close games. They were not close games either.
No, I'm sorry.
It was pretty gross. It was disgusting. They're 70 and 56. So.
Did the Reds lose to the Marlins at home, including getting shut out once?
They did lose 2 or 3 of them that very next week after the Braves did, yeah. So
sorry.
Your problems are minimal to me, Jay Phillips. They're minimal.
Are the Marlins the worst team in the National League?
The Astros are 8-10 in the last, or 8-2 in the last 10.
I don't like the Astros.
They're in there. They've got a 5-game lead now. They've kind of opened that up.
What happened to Texas, man?
Ugh. Yeah, they got their ring. That's it. They're hungover.
Oh, that's cool.
It's a classic hangover year.
The Marlins are the worst team in the National League by about a game. Actually, it is one game. They are one game worse than Colorado,
Tough.
who also beat the Braves a couple days ago.
Colorado's pretty bad. How many Rockies players do you think you can name right now?
Dante Bichette.
I don't think he plays anymore.
Larry Walker.
I don't think he plays anymore.
Todd Helton was good.
Not walking through that door.
No, none of them still play.
No.
Todd Helton's in the Hall of Fame.
He is.
How'd that happen? He's pretty good.
Yeah, he was solid. Pretty good first baseman.
Is Larry Walker's in the Hall of Fame, right?
I think he is,
in the Hall of Fame.
Very recently. I think it's in the last couple classes.
Yeah.
Actually.
Michael is up next on the phone lines. Wants to talk a little Gamecock football on this Wednesday. Michael, how you doing, buddy? Welcome in.
I'm good, guys. How are you?
Doing all right.
All right. That's good. I listen to y'all daily. Just want to say thank you for having me on, and I appreciate the discourse about Carolina football.
All right, right back at you.
But the question I kind of had toward y'all guys, I want to get y'all opinion on is, what do you think South Carolina's ceiling is this year if the O-line is just average? You know, I'm not asking for the O-line to be elite or a top 3 or a top 5 O-line in the SEC, just average, because, you know, it seems like ever since Shane Beamer's been here, we've had an issue with the O-line, and if the O-line was just better, I feel like we could have even been better the past couple of seasons, especially last year. And when you're looking at this South Carolina team, you should have a pretty good, consistent defense, and now you have a quarterback that can throw, but is also a legitimate running threat. So I'm just wondering, because now also you have Rocket Sanders, who, if he's healthy, should be an all-SEC back. So if the O-line is just average, what do you think the South Carolina ceiling is this year?
All right. That's a fair question, man. Good stuff, Michael. Thank you.
Yeah.
And thank you for listening every day. We appreciate you. First, let me say this. There's no doubt in my mind that that Shane and his recruiting acumen have zeroed in on the fact that they needed more offensive linemen. Better offensive linemen too, more of them, and again, more good players. That's something y'all hear me say a lot
Religiously.
Because it's true. I mean, it's college athletics. That's how you get better. That's it. I mean, you can have the greatest coach in the world. I've said before, I kid, but you give Nick Saban a bunch of dudes that look like me, and he ain't winning a bunch of titles.
Nope.
And I'm not saying that if you give me a bunch of Nick Saban's players, I win the same amount of titles. But I got a lot better odds of just looking at a bunch of 4 and 5 stars and going, hey, go.
Figure it out.
And winning some games than the other way around. I say that to make my point. They understand, Michael, absolutely, that they've got to get better up front. And I think last year they thought they had, and then injury after injury and shifting guys around and maybe guys that were not prepared for what they were going up against on the other side, against a bunch of grown men playing defensive line. You need to, first and foremost, figure out why that happened, and they've addressed that. And they did bring in some good talent on the line this year. So then you ask, all right, if they're just average, and I don't know, Elijah, you may have some of these things in front of you right this second. I do not. What the PFF numbers may have said about South Carolina's offensive line performance last year, I would imagine that it was very near the bottom of the Southeastern Conference when you consider, like Spencer was sacked 40 times. How often was he under duress? Carolina really didn't run the ball effectively enough last year. If they're just average, and I look at this schedule, I think, I really do think they can win 8 games. Yeah, and you might have a chance in a couple of more if they're just average. If they could really get good, who knows? I mean, look, LSU's more talented than you, but they come here early. Ole Miss is more talented than you, but what is Ole Miss thinking of themselves by the first week of October? Texas A&M comes in here. Yeah, they're more talented than you, but I think you can beat them. Missouri comes in here. I think they're more talented than you offensively. They're certainly more experienced, but by the time you see them in November, I don't know that Missouri should strike fear the way fear may be struck by going to Tuscaloosa.
Oh, no.
Or going to Norman. And I know you don't go to Athens this year or something like that, or even going to Clemson. Not that any of these games should strike fear in you. So, I realize I am maybe in the minority of people that follow this sport for a living when it comes to my takes on Mississippi and Missouri. I'm not saying they stink. I'm just saying I really need to see it. And I'm higher on Ole Miss than I am on Mizzou. Sorry, Eli. And maybe I shouldn't be. I don't know yet. I also wonder if both those head coaches are going to be in their respective jobs next season. But that's another story for another day. I think this team, if this offensive line play could come around to what they would like it to be in a reasonable sense, which I think is what he's asking.
Yeah.
I think they can win 8 football games.
Or they could at least be a top half of the SEC in rush offense. Because, here's the thing, too. You asked about the PFF grades, and yes, you were correct. I do have them in front of me. Pass block grade of all 133 teams in FBS football finished 106. Run block, 121. It was really, really bad. It was bad, and the health has a lot to do with that. When there's
Can we call average between? I mean, let's get some parameters between 50 and 70. Is that what we're looking at?
50 and 70. I mean, even then, if you just want to talk about being good enough to win,
that'd be a heck
games,
of an improvement. Man.
Yeah, it'd be a heck of an improvement. But would that heck of an improvement still lead to 8 games? It's tough. It's hard to. It's hard to tell.
I don't know.
Because it also depends on who steps up too. Because if you look at it, even if this unit stays healthy all year, so we're going to operate under that assumption. An assumption we know is probably not going to be true because this is football and stuff happens. But let's just say Josiah Thompson takes a while, he starts. And it might take a little bit before he ends up in his groove. He has a Caden Proctor experience. Because Caden Proctor, All-American high school player, blue chip recruit, comes to Alabama and stinks the first 4 or 5 weeks of the year. And by the time the end of the year rolls around, he's one of the best offensive linemen in the country. That's normal. That type of stuff happens, even if you are very large and immensely talented.
Right.
So we can even assume that happens. And it takes a while for him to get better. Let's say, Tree Babalade and Trovon Ball, as much as they made strides towards the end of the year, they don't call it a sophomore slump, without a reason. Sometimes people go in the sophomore year and they might slump. If we're talking worst case scenarios, those 2 things are happening and you're not staying completely healthy. And Vershawn Lee is having to do a lot more heavy lifting, kind of like what he did last year. And if injuries are a factor, he might have to do it at different roles on the offensive line. I think you're looking at something where you might rank, 90 in run block or pass block and maybe 106 in run block, which would be an improvement, yes, but would it be enough to win 8 games? I think that's more on the lower case scenario. I think the best case scenario is you can get both of those metrics into the top 70, and that gets you to a bowl game. And then you're a top 7 rushing attack in the SEC. There's a lot of really good offensive lines in this conference. A lot of them. There are a lot of really good running backs in this conference. I mean, you can probably, one of the hardest things I think we did at SEC Media Days was narrowing down running backs to put on the All-SEC team because it's a loaded group.
And they made us choose 6. I was like,
exactly.
I don't know, man.
And even then it was hard, man.
Yeah.
Even then I felt bad excluding certain guys. But I think, even if all things are equal and you stay relatively healthy, just because there's still a lot of youth on that offensive line, I still think your ceiling is just being a top half running game in the SEC. But even then, that can win you 7 games and get you into a bowl game that makes you feel better about the future of your program.
Yeah, and that's why I say it's tough. Look, you got 3 non-cons. You better win. You better beat Vandy. So you're halfway to 8 there. Again, I don't know if LSU is a toss-up game. I think that's one you have to steal.
I've talked myself into it being close to one.
Yeah. Is Ole Miss more of a toss-up? Maybe. Is A&M a toss-up? Is Missouri a toss-up? Again, looking like going to Bama and Oklahoma, I don't want to say don't get embarrassed. Alabama's still. I know there's a feeling around Bama of there's no way that they are. Yeah, I think they are. They are as loaded talent-wise. They've got a coach who seemingly has just forgotten how to lose games for the most part, which is great.
Yeah, that's a good quality to have in a coach. Yeah, just winning everywhere you go.
And again, I'm not a guy, when I look at Oklahoma, like I say, I feel like I'm somehow, it's Oklahoma, but somehow I feel like I'm in the minority with people who just think, well, I don't think Oklahoma can play in the SEC. Okay. I'm far more concerned about Texas' ability to play in the SEC than I am Oklahoma. Maybe this year's team, but in terms of program, but again, those are two different things. So, and again, it's hard, Michael, to go to your question to, I don't know exactly how we define average. The reason I asked between like 50 and 70, again, there's 134 schools, 67's in the middle. Now, that's not the average.
I think if they finish, if they're the best if they're one of the best, 50 run and pass blocking units in the sport, then it's up to Lenora Sellers to get you to 8-9 wins. You can maybe do that if that ends up being the case.
And without trying to get too much into the nitty-gritty of numbers, how far away in terms of measuring the PFF numbers is Carolina? If they're, what'd you say, 106 and 120 something?
Yeah, 106 in pass block, 121 in run block.
All right, how far are they from 80 in both? What kind of strides are we really talking about? Once you get a top 30, that's a whole different set of circumstances. But, sometimes we talk about it in recruiting rankings. The separation might just be that Auburn has one more 4-star than you do, and yet you're knocked down a couple of spots. You know what I'm saying? I don't know how to measure those.
So their overall grade was a little over 49. So if you give them 5, I guess, points or grades better on the path or on the run block, that puts them at 104.
Okay, so not much. So a 10% better score.
5, yeah.
Okay,
5, and then 10 will put you at.
No, I'm saying, but if you said their grade was 49, so if you had 5 more points, so you had 54.
10 more gets you at 77.
Yeah. Okay. So, and that'd be a 20% jump.
Yeah.
So that's a big ask.
They're starting at a really low spot.
Yeah, to get 20% better seems like a big ask, and that gets you still not into the top half of FBS, if that's what we call average.
Yeah.
So there's still a long way.
That's a good question, though. That's a really good thought.
It is.
To have.
Because
that's going to be the key of getting this offense good enough to be a top 7 offense in the conference.
If you get worse, man, then you got problems. That's all I'm going to say about that.
They're in trouble.
Speaking of the offense, we'll come back around with more from Dowell Loggins, offensive coordinator for Carolina, speaking earlier today. It's the Wednesday postgame show.